All right. We are live. And well, good week, everybody. And welcome to the weekly Torah studies. So, what makes a good experience at a restaurant? Anybody?
The service.
Yes,
Service.
that's what I was going to say. Service, good service.
Service, okay. What
And
else?
Great food.
Great food. And anything else?
No.
No?
Good price.
Good price, okay. Choice. How about ambiance?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. Now, if it was good food, but great service and great ambiance, does that outweigh great food, but, amazing food, but service and ambiance not so great? What outweighs what? All right, something to think about. All right.
It's all about the food. It's all about the food.
It's all about the food. Okay.
I'm with her on that one. I can put up with a lot if the food's really fabulous.
So it's all about the food. Food service is secondary. Anybody say food service and ambiance has maybe equal weight or more weight? Anybody? All right. So I'll put that in. It was this past week with someone, went out to actually a very nice restaurant. And the ambiance was great. The service was great. The food was, it was good. It wasn't, but the experience was great. All right. Where are we going with all of this? Welcome, folks. This week's Parsha speaks about Pesach because we're going out of Egypt. And going out of Egypt, one of the things about Pesach is that you're not allowed to have chametz on Pesach, leavened bread on Pesach. Not only you can't have it, you can't eat chametz on Pesach, but you can't have pleasure from chametz on Pesach or after Pesach. You can't have pleasure from it. And not only that, you can't even own it. So if chametz you have that has, the chametz that you have, and the chametz has gone over Pesach, not only, again, you can't eat it, and you can't have pleasure from it, you can't own it. Chametz you can't own on Pesach, which is unusual concept. Because we have non-kosher food, you can't eat it. But you could own it. You could even have pleasure from it. In other words, a non-kosher meat, you could give it to a dog. You could sell it to a non-Jew. Non-Jew doesn't have to eat kosher. So you can have a benefit from it. Milk and meat actually is interesting. You can't eat it, a mixture of milk and meat. You can't benefit from it either. But you could own it. Chametz is unique that you can't own it. And that's why we have on the eve of Pesach, we burn chametz. Now, we sell the majority of it, But the pieces that we go seeking for, we set up on, the night before the Seder, we set up 10 pieces and search for the chametz, b'dikas chametz. So we burn chametz in order to fulfill the mitzvah that any chametz we have, we destroy it, right? So the question is why? Why is this idea of, burning chametz as opposed to other things that have a prohibition that you just have to not eat it, right? Not benefit is another level, but here it's even not owning it. So in order to understand this idea, we're going to dive into the building blocks of the physical world and the 4 foundations of creation. Let's get right into that. Okay, there's our question. Let's go into reading number 1 from the Rambam. These 4 bodies, fire, wind, water, and earth, are the fundamental elements of all that was created under the sky, the body of everything that exists, be it human, beast, fowl, crawling creature, fish, plant, metal, precious stone, pearl, building stone, mountain, a lump of earth. It is a combination of these 4 elements. Now, the word elements is being used over here. Truth, in the Hebrew, it's not really elements, it's foundational. The word element is on Hebrew. And so, of course, if anybody went to high school like I did, when I was in high school, we all had the periodical table. In my day, I think there were just over 100. Today's 118. They're adding always to fundamental elements of creation. And here we bring it into 4. And these 4 are not necessarily, elemental to creation. So the question is, what is the Rambam's teachings? Is it just an outdated, limited form of science, or is it still relevant? So, an expert I'm not, but the Rebbe is, as the Rebbe is not only a great Torah scholar, but he's also a scientist, as he was an electrical engineer. So this is what he wrote in 1958 to a person who asked him this very question. So the Rebbe says the elements that our sages addressed are not foundational in the sense of being indestructible and indivisible. They're the foundation in the sense that everything that exists is comprised of them. They are also irrelevant to the chemical elements. There are those who understand these elements as characteristics such as cold, wet, hot, dry. This is why our sages called them characteristics of nature. So our sages were not talking about the periodical table. They're not elements of chemistry that are indivisible, but they're 4 characteristics: heat, cold, dryness, and moisture. And they appear in every physical item. Okay? The difference between one physical thing and another will be the consistency and the measurement. Right? Everything that is a little heavy and a little light, or a little dry, or a little moist, a little cold, and a little hot. Everything is made up of that. These conditions, they represent fire, water, air, and earth. Right? So let's take an example from liquids. If you have water and blood, they're both liquids, correct? Except blood is drier and it's heavier. It represents the ability to congeal. So in the context of the 4 foundations, it means that fire and earth are elements that are more present in blood than they are in water. Yet water also contains traces of fire element. How do we see that? Because it's susceptible to heat. So it has an element of fire in it. Okay, birds are lighter than crawling creatures, meaning they have more of the element of air in them in birds, while creepy crawling things have more the element of earth in them, and that's why they crawl rather than fly. That's the general principle that we're speaking about here. So we have 4 characteristics of everything in creation: hot, cold, dry, and moist, right? That derive from an abstract state and are found in everything in creation. As Maimonides says, oops. Oh, sorry. So we have the 4, but then Maimonides says there's a 5th generic element that encompasses all 4 elements. Unlike the 4 elements that emerge from it, the 5th element has no physical definition. So it comes out like this from creation. 4 elements, the source, which are sourced in a generic state. That's what the Rambam is saying. They evolve to take on particular characteristics, such as heat and cold, as we've explained, right? Generic state, then you have individual things that come together, or the individual qualities, and then they come together to create a physical object, right? All 4 elements. So maybe let's take it from this. Anybody a master chef here? No? Okay. No one competed, master chef?
My husband actually is a chef. We
Oh,
for 17 years, and he was actually on television once for it. So
okay.
I am by osmosis.
So you have a final product, a kugel or a salad, right? The final product, but then you have the elements that come to make the final product, right? You have the potatoes for the kugel, the eggs, the salt for the salad. You have the greens, you have the cucumbers, the celery, or whatever it is that you're putting into your salad with the dressing, and so on and so forth. And then you have the elements of all those elements in their abstract form before they are in their elemental form. So we have 3 things. We have the final product, the individual things that come to make a final product, and then those individual things, the way they're in a generic state before they are the particular product. Okay? So in other words, you have a physical thing. It's a mixture of 4 elements, 4 characteristics: heat, cold, dry, and moist, right? If you will, greens, tomatoes. That's a good example because they're all a mixture. They all have a mixture, right? Some are more dry, some are more moist, some are a pepper is hotter, right? A pepper has more heat to it, right? But then you mix them all together and you have one food element that comes out of it, one product, a salad. That clear? Okay. So now, based on this, let's get an understanding of why chametz must be destroyed before Pesach. There are 2 types of prohibition. 2 kinds of prohibition: chametz and everything else. And the truth is, there are 3 types. You can't eat non-kosher food. You can't benefit from certain things, like milk and meat, we said, right? And then chametz, which falls in a 3rd category, you can't even possess it. Not only can't benefit it, you can't even possess it. Okay? To understand the reason for the 3rd prohibition, we need to understand the elements to examine how they first come together. Okay. The things that are prohibited in the Torah, like non-kosher meat, it's only prohibited that you can't eat it. which is the final state of the product itself, right? Not the elements that go into the product, but the product itself. That's the final state. It's like, it's like you make a salad. My daughter made a salad tonight in our house. We had our families from Montreal, grandchildren. They came, and Simcha together, beautiful. Actually, I ran out of there to be here now. And so Simcha put together all the vegetables. And Esty dressed it, and I just tossed it. Now, so Esty asked me, what's missing? Is there needs more this or that? In other words, sometimes you're missing something. You've maybe got too much salad, or you don't have enough tomatoes, or you put too much salt, and you need then to balance it, right? In other words, the final product is off based because the balance isn't there. So the taste doesn't have a proper taste, right? That represents the idea of something that's prohibited to eat. Because the final product, in other words, the impurity that is affected over here is to the level of that there's a wrong balance over here, and therefore it's not edible, right? Could you make it edible? I mean, the metaphor breaks down over here because, of course, you can make it edible because you just have to season it differently. But a non-kosher meat is a coming together of the different elements of fire, air, water, and earth, right, that create this non-kosher being, a non-kosher animal, or non-kosher meat, rather, that it is now like the salad that is just inedible because the mixture isn't appropriate. Okay? Now, what if the issue wasn't about the mixture, but the salad, the romaine salad was bitter? That's more fundamental, right? That's deeper problem in the salad. Correct? That's a deeper problem. That, by the way, this is all a metaphor I'm using, right? It's a metaphor to explain that would be then the problem that is more deeper in the product. So, for example, milk and meat, when they're cooked together, not only can't you eat it, there's something more fundamental problem over here. You can't even have pleasure from it. It's more fundamentally corrupt, shall we say, as a product. And therefore, not only can't you eat it like a non-kosher burger, but you can't even have any benefit from it. It means you can't even give it to your dog. You can't even give it to a non-Jewish neighbor. You can't do that. Is that clear? My metaphor good? It's a bit abstract. Okay. Now let's put this into other terms. We learned this in Tanya, this concept, the idea of forbiddenness. Forbidden foods are called usr, tied down. Usr means tied down. If someone eats something erroneously for the sake of heaven, intended to use its nourishment to study Torah or pray, the nourishment does not attach to the words of the Torah and prayer. It cannot become holy. It is tied down to unholiness. So I gave a metaphor of the metaphor of the salad, that you don't have the right mixture. It's inedible. Meaning, so in halachic terminology, it's usr. Usr means forbidden. It's forbidden because it's bound to negative forces. And those negative forces don't allow it. It's tied down to the earthiness of this world and cannot be elevated to God. And therefore, it's forbidden to eat it, right? Let's back up a moment. We know that everything comes from God. God gives vitality to everything. He's the source of all vitality. When you do a mitzvah, as we're doing now, studying Torah, the vitality we get is directly from God. It's the perfect cooked food, exactly plated beautifully, and the best atmosphere, right? With good friends around a Shabbos table. It's perfect. Your mother giving you her best dish, she gives it to you lovingly. That's when you do a mitzvah. God gives you vitality, gives you life to do the mitzvah directly from him. Like a mother gives food to her children, she's giving love that's embodied in food. But then you get food that's not from your mother, right? It's from the waiter, right? So it's not given so lovingly. Right? It might even be given the attitude. And what happens? The food itself isn't the right mix, doesn't have the right time, doesn't have the right taste. It's not kosher. It's bound down to extraneous forces. The life force, because it's not kosher, is not able to be elevated, right? That's the concept of something that's not kosher. But then you have something that's even more further bound to extraneous forces, to negative forces, to klipa, to sitter acher, to negativity. It's so bound up that you can't even benefit from it, like mixture of milk and meat. Okay? What's the difference between the two? So I gave a metaphor. Let's see what the Rebbe says. When we eat something for the benefit from its finished form, the edible form, we do not interact with the elements that form the food. When we derive benefit from something, we interact with the elements that form it. So when it comes to non-kosher food, we're only not allowed to have the pleasure of the palate, right? Because the interaction is with the final product. So this final product, the salad that is not mixed or is not mixed well, or is just got too much, it's too much salt, makes it inedible, or whatever the case may be. That is just with the taste. But then there is something that it's not just with the taste buds, but that the product itself is something wrong with it. It's bitter or it's moldy, that the thing itself, you can't benefit from it, right? The salad. When it's a wrong mixture, so you could give it to your dog might enjoy that salad, right? You can have benefit from it. But when it's moldy, don't give it to your dog because it's gonna, hurt your dog, as it will hurt you. In other words, there's something more fundamentally a problem over here, and that is like like milk and meat, that is more fundamentally something negative about it, that you can't even have any benefit from it. Okay. There's a little abstract. Let's go. That explains further. Foods that are forbidden to eat are tied down to unholiness. However, it's crucial to recognize that the unholiness pertains only to the outer surface of the finished form of the food, which renders it unsuitable for consumption. The individual elements that constitute the food item that's associated with potential benefit are not inherently unholy. Consequently, we derive benefit from these elements. So the non-kosher meat is not inherently in the element of it. It's meaning the element that makes it what it is not inherently unholy, therefore you can benefit from it. What's unholy about it is its final product. What's the final product? It's not kosher meat. And therefore, non-kosher meat, you can't just you can't have pleasure from the palate, but you can benefit from it. Because on the elemental level, it is not unholy. Okay? Okay. Now we've only explored it on two levels. The level of the final product, that the final product is unholy, and therefore the product itself you can't enjoy, meaning eating it, non-kosher meat, but the elemental level of that product is not unholy, therefore you could. Then we have a level that it is unholy, even on the elemental level, and that's like milk and meat. Now let's go to the next level. Right now, so you have, again, you have the final product, but the final product is from the lettuce, is from the various vegetables, other vegetables you put in, right? And it's the seasoning and everything that all comes together, right? That's the final product. Then you have the products themselves before they go into the mix, right? That's the elemental level of the product, where you can't have pleasure from it, benefit rather from it, when that on that level it's not holy. But then we have on the level of not the elemental individual product that comes together, but we have now its source, its elemental source, its generic state, sort of the abstract of it before it is, the spices that go in and the various vegetables that go into it. And that's where chametz falls in on Pesach, into this category. It's saying that the energy on that level is also unholy. In other words, the core source of the elements that go into making the final product, the core elemental source of it, it too is unholy. And that's why even having it in your possession, chametz, on Pesach, you're not allowed. Not allowed. Non-kosher meat you can have in your possession. Even milk and meat you can have in your possession. Why? Because they're not corrupt to the core. They're not unholy to the core. Chametz on Pesach is. So what's its anecdote, or what do we do with it? You have to burn it. And that's why there's a mitzvah on Erev Pesach to burn chametz. Now, you don't have to burn all your chametz because you could sell your chametz, right? But if you found chametz on Pesach, you would have to burn it. Why? Because you can't possess it. You can't give it away at that time. You can't give it away. Before Pesach, you could give it away. You could sell it to a non-Jew. That you could do. Pesach comes, not only you can't eat chametz, not only you can't sell the chametz and benefit from selling your box of Cheerios on, you didn't even open the box of Cheerios and you sell out your chametz on Pesach to the non-Jew. Before Pesach, you could do that because it's not yours anymore, right? But on Pesach, you can't sell it. You can't do it. Can't have, because not, and you can't sell it and you can't own it. But you do own it, and therefore you're over that, you transgress that prohibition. Okay, so as the Rebbe explains, chametz may not be found in our possession, even if we make absolutely no use of it and derive no benefit from it. This means that the entire object, even to the very core, to its very core, that's divested of all form, right? It's its core, it's divested of form, is tied down to unholiness. This is why the ownership of its very existence is forbidden. I know this was extremely abstract idea. You got it, Helen?
Passover, it wasn't unholy.
Right? You're right.
And it goes unholy.
Exactly.
Like that.
Just like that. Yeah.
Mm.
I'll give you another example. I'll give you another example. It's not about a why, it's about understanding what. Let me give you another example. If you are in the times of the Holy Temple, it doesn't apply today, but let's say in the times of the Holy Temple, right before Shabbos, you light a cigarette. Not that you should light a cigarette. That's not a good idea, right? But it's not a prohibition. You do it 1 minute after sunset, just 1 minute. And there's 2 witnesses who warn you, you could get the death sentence. 1 minute before, okay, you might get the death sentence because you're smoking. Maybe that's not a good example, right? Because 1 minute before, you might get the death sentence with your lungs. A minute later, right? Does that make sense? It's not rational. Like, what's the big difference? What happened that a minute before I could smoke the cigarette, or let's say light the candles. A minute before Shabbos, I can light Shabbos candles, right? And then I light a minute before, you should light 18 minutes before, that's a safeguard. But let's say, a minute before you lit, before sunset. Now you lit a minute after sunset. You are liable for the death sentence, right? With witnesses and so on. I mean, it won't be so much so then because it's a question of if it's Shabbos because it's twilight time. So that's a bit of an issue. But let's just presume, right? So imagine that. Does that make sense? It's not logical.
It's the same cigarette.
It's the same candle that you lit, right? But this is the spiritual state of the world. Before that, lighting a candle is permissible. Not only that, it could be a mitzvah because you're lighting Shabbos candles. When you did it on Shabbos, not only it's not permissible, it could be liable or a death sentence. And today we don't have that, but you're liable for it, right? Why? Because the reality of the world changed. It's now Shabbos. The world is elevated. It's in a different state of being. So the same thing comes Pesach. Before Pesach, that chametz I could eat a day before, right? Not the eve of Pesach. By 10 o'clock, you got to finish eating chametz, right? But let's say 8 o'clock in the morning, I could eat chametz. It's okay. It's permissible. And then all of a sudden, it becomes not only that I can't eat it, I can't even benefit from it. I can't even sell it at a certain time to a non-Jew. I can't even give it to my dog, or I can't give it. I can't even give it to somebody. It still belongs to me, and I am transgressing. The only thing I can do is burn it at that time, because I'm not allowed to not only not eat it, I'm not allowed not only to derive benefit from it by selling it, but I can't even own it. So what do I have to do that I shouldn't own it? Burn it. If you find chametz on Pesach, that's what you have to do, right? So why? Maybe before it wasn't a problem, because the world is a different world. Once Pesach comes in, it's a different spiritual state of being. We're not so sensitive to it and not so aware of it, but that's what the law is, because the law is reflecting the spiritual reality. So the spiritual reality is that non-kosher meat only is affecting the final status of the product, the meat itself. And therefore, the only thing you can't do, the final product is only about your pleasure of enjoying it, right? That's the final product. That's what it's intended. Its general intended purpose is in the eating of the food. So that's forbidden. But elementally, there's nothing wrong with it. And therefore, you can benefit from it and sell it to a non-Jew, non-kosher meat, or give it to a dog, right? You can do that. But milk and meat, you can't do that because it's being affected on the elemental level, not as a final product right? Not as a final product, but on the elemental level, it is affected to a degree that it's unholy, its vitality, to such a degree that any element of it, I cannot benefit from it, and therefore I can't benefit from it, right? It's not just the final product, it's everything that went into it that is elementally wrong, right? let's give the metaphor. The romaine lettuce is bitter. The tomatoes were moldy. The cucumbers were mushy and like watery, right? Elementally, each one of them, right? Not as the final product. Each one elementally was something wrong with it, right? That's representing the unholiness of it. That is the milk and meat. So therefore, you can't even have benefit from any aspect of it. Now we're speaking about another level beyond the elemental, because now when you're starting off with the various things, then there's the way that the cucumbers, the tomatoes, and the lettuce, and the pepper, and the salt, and whatever other ingredients you're putting in there, the vinegar, they are rooted in their source, the abstract source of their creation, which means not just the benefit of the thing itself, but to the very core, this is unholy. So since in the very core it's unholy, I can't even own it. Can't be in my possession. That's chametz. That's the uniqueness of chametz. By the way, the Pesach Seder, if you remember in the Pesach Seder, there's a debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. How many plagues were there? So they go through different by verses and so on, and Rabbi Eliezer does it by 4, multiplies by 4, and Rabbi Akiva by 5. Rabbi Eliezer says 4 because the elements of everything is 4, right? Fire, air, water, earth. So he says, in other words, the corruption of the Egyptians was to the 4 elements themselves, was corrupt. Not just the final product, but the elements themselves, right? So it wasn't just one plague. It was a plague times 4. That's how he understands. Why? Because the corruption of the Egyptians was to the elemental level. And therefore the plague was like a 4-time plague. Each plague, because it had to touch each level of the elements. Rabbi Akiva says it was 5, because he says even the abstract level, they even were so an abject, evil people that they even touched the very core, and therefore the plague came to fix. The plagues were not just merely a punishment, they were actually the rectification of the impurity and the evil of the Egyptians. So we went to the elemental, not just the elemental level, but to the abstract level of the physical thing that the plague came to destroy, to even on its abstract source level, its very core. In other words, its core level. If you'll look at the Haggadah when Pesach comes, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay, now that I thoroughly confused you, what does this all mean? So what? What's the lesson we take out of this? What do we learn from this? So Rebbe says, let's learn something this in a positive way. Right? We learned that the idea of what chametz on Pesach is, right? Leavened bread, leavened foods on Pesach. Let's understand now what this means in spiritual terms in our lives. Okay, that was just. There are 4 dimensions in the soul, says the Alter Rebbe. They are thought, speech, action. The 4th is the supernal will of God that transcends thought, speech, and action. This is drawn down and exposed in the world by performing a mitzvah. So, what does it mean, the 4 elements in our lives? We're just like there's 4 elements in everything in creation. That means that when you are here as a servant of God, right? Just like you go in the restaurant, you have someone who serves you. So we're here in God's garden. We're here to serve God. In the service of God, the basic fundamental level, the external level, we call them garments of the soul, which are thought, speech, and action. And the fourth element is the desire that you have to do it. In other words, you're not doing it out of ball and chain merely, right? But you are in that you desire to do this. It's not forced upon you, right? In other words, you're happy to serve. You have the desire to serve God, as opposed to doing it for the reward, doing it out of fear of punishment, right? That's not the basic level. The basic level of serving God is that you are doing it in your thought, speech, and action, right? As we're learning in Tanya, BIT's, Beinoni in training, is that we are serving in those garments of self-expression together with a desire that that's what we want. We want to be in the service of God. We're happy to be in the service of God, right? We're happy to be what we're doing. And that's really important, right? So, for example, did you ever go to a restaurant and you get served and the person that serves you, you know, they're just not interested in what they're doing, right? Can barely make a smile. They're not pleasant. And that takes away from the experience, right? Because their will is not there. So sometimes it can be like some people don't care. They just care about the good food. They couldn't care about the service. But some people, you know, they're going to a place and the atmosphere is, you know, it's not just what you ingest, but it's what is around you. So if it's a nice place with nice people and, you know, the service is pleasant, then it adds to the experience. So what God wants is that we should serve him in a pleasantness, that this is what we want to do, that you are happy in what you're doing. That's the first level. That's the first one in serving God, right? As Rabbi Kaliner said, sadness is not a sin. However, the worst sin cannot turn off our hearts as much as sadness. Someone who fails to rejoice over the privilege of being a Jew to serve God and is ungrateful to God. That we recognize how lucky we are that we can serve God, and we do that with joy. That's the beginning level. But that's not really to your core. What it would mean to serve God to your very core? Anybody? Mm-hmm. Any example? Bittul, yes. Give me an example. We begin our prayer service 365 days a year in the Tilas Hashem Siddur. I mean, besides the morning blessings, of course, we start, we'll wake up with Maidani, but after the morning blessings, we say, V'haftarecha kamecha, the mitzvah of, mitzvah zese, it's a positive commandment to love your fellows yourself. Start with that, then we, Mato VaEilecha, and we say Adon Olam, and then we go and we speak about Avraham Avinu, Abraham, bringing his son as an offering. This is the fifth element that is to the core. And we start that in the morning before our prayers to give us an indication of what it means to give of your very core. Avraham, all he wanted was to have someone, a progeny that would carry on his teachings, his ways. That's all he wanted. And now God tells him to bring him as an offering. It's touching at the core. And he does it. He does it. He goes and does what he got to do. Now, of course, that was a test, and that's what Hashem wanted, but, right? But to give of your core. There's a beautiful story of the Mizitcher, Maggid. Mizitcher Maggid, who's the Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe, right? The successor of the Baal Shem Tov. So his custom was, Shabbos afternoon, he would say Hasidic teachings. Every Shabbos afternoon, with all of his students around the table, he would say Hasidic teachings. One Shabbos afternoon, he gave a very deep Talmudic, halachic discussion, debate back and forth. The details are not given. And he gave that over unusually, like the opposite, a very hair-splitting debate in the Talmud. After Shabbos, he went to Reb Zusha from Anipol, was one of his students. You know who some of the students were? Reb Zusha, his brother Reb Elimelech from Lizensk, Shlomi Karliner, Aaron Karliner, the Alter Rebbe. He was the youngest of all the students. He was the youngest. He was 19 when he came to the Mizitcher Maggid. A year and a half, so he left when he was 20 something, right? Or 21. The Tolda Sara and Yosef Yitzchak, and many others. In any case, imagine one of the, if you want to be a fly on the wall, one of the places you'd want to be a fly on the wall is to be in that company, because it was the followers of the Mizitcher Maggid that became the Rebbes throughout the world afterwards, right? That's where then you had all the different Hasidic dynasties from him. In any case, so he tells Reb Zusha after Shabbos, I want you to go over what I spoke about on Shabbos and know it very well. And then once you know it, I want you to far reis von Stadt. I want you to travel outside of the city. He doesn't say what, where, what to do, nothing. Right? Okay, he knows it. He goes and he travels. Fine, he travels and it gets very, it's a winter, like, when Shabbos ends early and it's getting late and it's freezing outside. So he comes into a kretschme, an inn, and he asks for a room. I said, sorry, we're sold out. It was a Jewish inn. It was sold out. He says, yeah, I need a place. I can't go back out. It's freezing. So, let me see. There's one room that has a big rabbi there. And there's extra space there. Maybe he'll allow you to have a cot there. Speaks to him. He said, fine. And he comes in. See, he's not a Hasidic of the Hasidic persuasion. And they start talking. They're both, scholars, and they start talking in words of Torah. And he tells her his name was Raphael Hamburger, Rabbi Raphael Hamburger. Okay. And guess where he's going? He's going to Hamburg to try to make up Frava, to audition, if you will. I don't know if it's the right word, for becoming the rabbi of Hamburg, right? And he's prepared with his pilpul, with his, not pulpit rabbis, giving nice flowery speeches about, current events. It's a big, halachic, Talmudic exegesis that he's prepared. And he starts to tell him, to discuss it with him. And guess what he was telling him? Exactly what the Mizitcher Magi told him at Mincha time. The same pilpul. But at some point, he finishes. So the Mizitcher Magid told him, know it well. So he knew it well. So he asked him a question from Tosfos and Nedarim that destroys the whole argument that he was making. He was making an argument and destroyed the whole thing. Oh, you've destroyed my whole teachings now. Like he was dejected, despair. Like he's going to Hamburg and he's got to try out for this position. And what's going to be? He says, well, I have the answer for you. So I want to hear. I want to hear. The Mizitcher Magid, what he said on Mincha time, he says, I'll give it to you under one condition. You have to go meet my Rebbe, the Mizitcher Magid. After going to Hamburg, and you have to go back to meet him. Well, he was not a chassid, and he didn't like that idea. So he tried to manipulate any way to get the answer. He said, no, this is the only way. Finally, he relents. He gives his hand, he shakes, I'll go. He tells him then the rest of the pilpul. So, saved his life. Goes to Hamburg and does a good job. And he's got to go back home to prepare, come back and whatnot. And he goes to Vilna. To who? The Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon, for those who know, he's the chief antagonist against the Mizitcher Magid and later the Alter Rebbe and the Hasidic movement. The chief, he was the leader of the opposition, of the Misnagdim, as they were called back then, the opposers. And he tells him the whole story, what happened. He doesn't know Mizitcher Magid said this to the Reb Zusha, said this, right? That he doesn't know. He just knows that he made an agreement. He gave his hand. He shook on it. So he said, I want you to annul my commitment. He says to Vilna Gaon, says, no, I can't. You need to go. But I want you to find out 3 things for me when you go. What are the 3 things he wants to find out for me? I want to know, do the Hasidim have proper respect for their Torah sages? Secondly, I want to know, are the Hasidim, his students, are they scholarly in the Talmud? I don't want to know about in the Kabbalah and Hasidic teachings. That I know they're scholarly, but are they scholarly in the fundamentals of the Talmud? I want to know that. And thirdly, I want to know, does the Mizitcher Magid have Ruach HaKodesh? Does he have divine inspiration? Is he divinely inspired? Okay. So he's off on a mission. He comes to Mezerich, and he comes to the base midrash in the study hall where the Mizitcher Magid, his students are around the table, and they're awaiting their Rebbe. And Mizitcher Magid had very weak legs. He wasn't that healthy. And he had crutches and kind of made noise or whatever. And the moment they heard the crutches, they got up like out of this sense of awe, sense of like, the Rebbe is walking in. And those who've seen videos of the Rebbe, you know what that means. And he sees right away, oh, they have respect for their Torah scholars. Right? So he sits down and he starts speaking. He's in the corner, not introducing himself. He's not saying a word. No one's saying anything. Like, he's just viewing what's going on. And so the Mizitcher Magid starts to speak, and then in the middle of his speaking, A woman comes in with a chicken, a dead chicken that was slaughtered, and she has a question, halachic question: is it kosher? Is it not kosher? I don't know what the issue was. Mrs. Schmucky looks at it and he gives it to the student next to him. Give me your opinion on it. He gives his opinion and he quotes from Talmudic sources. He quotes from the halachic sources, from responsa and everything. Very deep, and he give it to the next student. Next student goes all the way around the table, and each one gives like this great Talmudic. Each one's saying something different, unique, a different angle. One chicken. How much could you get from one chicken? I guess, chicken soup, make chicken soup for Shabbos, it can serve you a whole week. Well, this was serving a whole table full of the students. And he saw, wow, the genius of the students in the Talmudic teachings. Right? That was one of the questions. Number 2. And finally comes to it comes to the Mizvah Magid. And he gives it, and he looks at it and he said, why do we have to make a halachic judgment on this chicken? We have Rabbi Raphael Hamburger here that just came from Hamburg. Let him give his judgment on this. Oh my gosh, he's blown away. Yes, he does have divine inspiration. So he goes back to Vilna, tells the Vilna, what do you have against these Hasidim? They're great scholars. They have great respect for their Rebbe. And boy, he has divine inspiration, no doubt about it. I mean, that didn't change things because about a year or so later, the Vilna Gaon made a ban of excommunication against the Hasidim. That they should be executed. Excommunicated means that you can't be part of a minyan. So in the non-Hasidic synagogues, they weren't allowed to enter, to be part of a minyan. That's what happened. I mean, it was a serious time. And so he wanted the Rav of Hamburg, Rabbi Raphael Hamburger, that he should sign and be the second signature with many other rabbis, and he refused. Because he knew that this is people that you should not. Now, there's so much in this story. I just want to take out one idea here. Reb Zusha. Imagine, I'm thinking to myself, that Rebbe came and told me, after your Shabbos, learn this, know it well, and then just go. So, well, where should I go? What should I do? We'd all ask that. You know why? Because we're lacking in bittul. Bittul means self-effacement. Rav Zusha had such bittul. If the Mizvah Magid wanted him to go somewhere specific, he would have told him. And he knows that. So he's not asking because he wasn't told. We'd all ask. Because we'd be like, huh? Just go. Okay. Right? I mean, if we were told just go, we would do it. Right? The Rebbe tells you would do it. But he didn't even have a question in his mind to ask. Because he wasn't told, so that means just go. That's what the instructions are. That's what you do. And because he has bittul to the core, therefore he goes where he has to go. And he does what he has to do. To make this person who was a big misnagid, not such a misnagid anymore, had respect and wouldn't sign against the Chassidim in the end. So I'm bringing this out in the idea over here when we're speaking about that there's being to the core that it is something that you can't have any even possession of it, like chametz. On the positive side, on the health, is to the core that there's no me there that even has a question. Go? Okay, I'm going. Imagine you would think in his mind, he'd think, okay, I mean, there's many directions to go. I don't know what went on in his mind and how he figured it out, but he didn't question his Rebbe. So Rebbe, what do you want from me? You know, you want me to go south? You want me to go north? You want me to go east, west? Which town? Which would be legit, seemingly. Of course, it would be legit because, but that just shows on the lack of the bittul, right? So Hashem comes to Avram. He says, "Go." He didn't tell him where. It's just go. For 3 days, and then finally he shows, okay, that's where I want you. Same thing here. Mizitcher Magid tells him, "Go." So he goes, and he accomplishes exactly what he had to accomplish. Because to the very core, he's given over to serve. It's the core of his being, period. So in our lives, you know, to be given over in such a manner that whatever it is, this is, okay, you know, now that's if a Rebbe, God talks to you, you know, said to Avram, he talks, right? A Rebbe has divine inspiration, so now he tells you, go out, go from the city. Okay, so you go from the city with complete confidence that you are fulfilling your mission. So that's the key for us, that we need to know. You know, people ask me, well, what's going to happen in Gaza afterwards? You know, how are we gonna deal with Gaza afterwards? I don't know. I didn't get out of the city yet, right? It's like what are we gonna? He didn't know, Reb Zusha, where he's going and what he's got to do. He just knows he's got to go. So what's going to happen again? All you know right now is that we have to eradicate the evil. What will be the next step? Let's go and let's trust in God that we're going to go in the right direction, do the right thing, and each step will lead to the next step, and it'll play itself out the way it needs to play itself out. Not like have the end game. There's no end game. Just this is what you got to do it. So sometimes you need to know the end game, where you're going, because you're told what the end game is. You know what the end game is, right? But sometimes you don't know what the end game is. So just go and do what you got to do, and have trust in Hashem that He's leading you in the right path, and you're doing the Rebbe's mission, and then finished, and it'll work out. That takes a real bittul. That's to the core, that you're given over. That you're given over to the core. So just as chametz is the opposite of it, and therefore you can't own it. And what's chametz is ego, right? It's the concept of ego, which is the opposite of bittul. So the bittul is to the core, the opposite of chametz, that's the ego to the core. And then that's the lesson to learn. And then with that, l'chaim. I didn't put up about TRC, but we have TRC shortly. All right.
Good. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
You're
Shabbat.
well.
Bye,
Well.
everyone.
Bye-bye.